Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for waiting. We just had a couple of technical difficulties that we were ironing out. Thank you for your patience. We're starting here at 1:03 p.m. and thank you for coming to this voter education workshop. We have two excellent speakers here today. We have Omar Suarez from the New York City Campaign Finance Board, and we have Ariel Merkel from the Board of Elections in the City of New York. Before we go into a little bit of the background of these two wonderful speakers, Chris, our technical advisor here, is going to give us a little bit of the lay of the land on some instructions. So, Chris.
Well, good afternoon. As Cathy just said, I hope that everybody will enjoy this workshop today. I just want to run through a quick couple of housekeeping things first. You are muted upon entry right now. If anybody needs to ask a question, there will be some pauses throughout this workshop, and they will take questions then. If you need to mute yourself via phone, you can press *6, and you can also unmute yourself by pressing *6 as well. If you're a phone user and want to raise or lower your hand, it's *9. And if you need to mute yourself with the computer, click on the mute button, or if you're a blind or visually impaired person, it's either Alt-A or Command-A. So if there's any questions, please ask them when the pauses take place throughout the presentation or at the end, and I hope everybody will enjoy.
Thank you, Chris. Just one other thing, we do have AI live transcription available, so you can click on that. It's down below under CC, and we will provide the transcript at the end of the presentation. We ask that people not talk over each other so that the AI does as best as it can in providing information. And we will have later on some handouts that we will provide in the next couple of days. First of all, I'm Cathy Collins. I'm one of the co-coordinators for Downstate New York staff. And just to let you know, I have like reddish brown hair. I'm a white woman, and I have brown eyes, and I'm wearing a red shirt top today with no sleeves. And we'll go right to the presentation. Our first speaker, well, we're going to have two speakers, and we're going to be going back and forth with each speaker. So our first person I'd like to tell you a little bit about is Omar Suarez. And like I said before, he's the Director of Partnerships and Outreach at the New York City Campaign Finance Board, where he works with organizations such as ours, city agencies and businesses to increase voter education and participation in the elections in the city of New York. Previously, he served as a program director for the Dominicanos USA in New York, an initiative dedicated to advancing the civic engagement of Dominican immigrants.
Open arrow.
Mr. Suarez holds a Bachelor of Arts as well as a Master's in Policy Management from Georgetown University. Our next speaker will be Ariel Merkel, and Ms. Merkel is the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, coordinator for the Board of Elections in the City of New York. Ms. Merkel oversees the ADA unit of the Board of Elections, which is a unit that is tasked with ensuring the electoral process is accessible for voters and poll workers with disabilities. This includes deploying ramps to poll sites, providing sign language interpretation for poll workers, and distributing an accessible version of the absentee ballot for voters with disabilities. Ms. Merkel is a certified ADA coordinator and holds Masters of Arts and Masters of Philosophy degrees from the New York New School for Social Research, as well as a Bachelor of Arts from Wells College. Her doctoral research is in the sociology of disability. Prior to working for the Board of Elections, she served as the Disability Integration Advisor for FEMA and held several contracts involving various disability rights projects with the United Nations, including a publication called, quote, Towards an Inclusive and Accessible Future for All, end quote. All right, so let's get on with this wonderful program. And we're going to do, like we said, after each section, if you can just refer your question to that section. I know we're going to deal with a lot of different issues. So if it doesn't deal with that section, just hold it up because we probably will get to it in another section. So we really appreciate that because we only have an hour here. And right now it's also 1:08. The time is already fleeing. So first section is before you vote. All right, my first question is to Omar. How does one check to see that they are registered to vote in New York State?
Hi, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna dive right into the question. Just want to provide my own audio description and say hello to everyone before I respond and provide an answer to that. I also have some slides up on the screen, which I'll do my best to describe. My name is Omar Suarez. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Outreach with the New York City Campaign Finance Board. We're an independent agency that ensures that local elections are fair, inclusive, and open. We also do voter education under our NYC Votes initiative, which is how we partner with Cathy and many of you on this call today. I want to just pass it to my co-presenter today, Ariel, to share a little bit about the BOE and their ADA unit.
Thanks, Omar. Thanks for the introduction, Kathy. I'm Ariel Merkel. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown and grayish hair with a black shirt and white earrings. I'm in my office right now. And I work for the Board of Elections in the city of New York. We are the ones that put on the election. So we deploy the equipment, train the poll workers, and conduct the elections. So I'm just going to read a brief description on the slide. The Board of Elections in the City of New York conducts honest and fair elections from local to federal levels for all registered voters, including voters with disabilities. The ADA unit, which is my unit, is responsible for ensuring the BOE is both a government agency and an employer in compliance with the ADA, and that voters with disabilities are able to vote privately and independently. So Omar is going to kind of give the broader descriptions of what is happening with this upcoming election, important dates and other changes. And I'll kind of give the more specialized information that's targeted to voters with disabilities. So that's kind of the way that we're going to balance, and we'll kind of go back and forth between the two of us.
Thank you, Ariel. And I realized I didn't actually give my audio description, even though I said I would. I am a tan-skinned man. I'm of mixed African and Spanish ancestry. I have curly black and white hair, and I'm sitting in my cubicle, with a blurred background. So for today's agenda, we will start with just what you need to know before you go and vote. Then we'll go into what you need to know when you're voting at your poll site. After that, we're going to talk about absentee voting. And then finally, we're going to end off with the important election info and some resources that you can tap into, to know your rights as a voter and all the other information you'll need. So just to get into it and finally get back to Cathy's question.
Would you like me to ask it again? I can do
Sure.
that. Okay, it's how does one check to see if they are registered to vote in New York State?
Sure thing. And just to reiterate for folks who may know, may not know, in New York State, to be able to vote, you must be a US citizen, you must be 16 or 17 years old to pre-register, 18 years old to register and vote, and you must have a mailing address to be able to register to vote. Now, if you want to know if you're already registered, what the status of your voter registration is, you can go to what's called the voter lookup tool. It's a website, and the link itself, it is up on the screen. I'm going to read it. It's voterlookup.elections.ny.gov. We'll share, and we will share out these links with everyone via email and in a format that's easily screen readable. So that link is voterlookup.elections.ny.gov. You go there, you will need to provide your name, date of birth, and zip code, and the system will tell you if you're registered under what party affiliation, what address you're registered at, and that's how you can confirm if you're registered and at the correct address.
Okay, we're going to get to your question in a minute, Mr. DiBenedetto. Let me just do another question here is, what are the different ways a person can vote?
Okay, I wanted to, I can go into that. There are 3 different ways that someone can vote right now. Obviously, voting on election day is the longest running way that people have been able to cast their vote in New York. That is, going on election day, the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. You go in person, you get a ballot, and you put it in the voting machine. Now, for the last couple of years, New York has had early voting, where we have 9 days before election day. It's 2 weekends and the week before election day, not the Monday, but 2 weekends and the week before, where you can go. There are hours on the weekends and evenings, and you can cast your ballot in person at a designated early voting site, which is likely different than your election day site. And then the third way, which we're also going to spend some time talking about today, is absentee voting or voting by mail, where you request a ballot be sent to you to your home, where you can fill it out without going to a poll site. And then there are a number of ways that you can submit that absentee ballot.
Okay, now that we finished this section, we just have a follow-up question from Mr. DiBenedetto, and he wrote it in the chat here. It says, can individuals also call to find this information about whether they're registered to vote? Because he works with older adults and they may prefer this method over, having to go on the computer.
So I was just responding to him that you can call the Board of Elections and we will be able to give you that information. So the number is 1-866-VOTE-NYC. And as long as you have, the correct birthday and the spelling of the name, we'll be able to look that information up for you.
Great. Okay, now we're going to the next section, which is voting at your poll site. That's up here on the screen. And my first question is to Omar, and that is, how does a person find their poll site?
That is a great question. And the short answer is there's actually a website that you can go to, and it's findmypollsite.vote.nyc. Findmypollsite.vote.nyc. At that website, you will enter your building number and street. You don't need to enter your personal information, but the building number and street for the address where you're registered to vote. And what you'll get back is a description of what election day poll site you're assigned to, what early voting site you're assigned to, what the hours are for the early voting site, because they do change from day to day. You'll also be informed of what the accessible entrance to the poll site is. Ariel's going to talk about that in a second. And you'll also be able to view a sample ballot based on your district information, what the ballot's going to look like when you get to that poll site.
Thank you.
I could just interrupt one moment. I just want to reiterate that almost all this information is specific to people in New York City, not throughout the state. So that website is actually tied to our database. So it's the city's database, not the state. So most of this information is relevant to people registered to vote within the 5 boroughs.
Thank you. Also, I know when we send out the information, I will provide, there is under the New York State Board of Elections, there's a link also that you can click onto, and I will put that in our follow-up information. Also, I'd just like to note that Miriam Fisher gave a great thing in the chat that you can also telephone to find out about where your poll site, and that would be to your local Board of Elections that you would telephone, is that correct?
You can use that same number that I posted earlier. That's the whole city. You could
Okay.
call your specific borough office as well. But if you call the general office, which is kind of the citywide office, which is where my unit is located, we can answer the question for you too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, now we have, this is for Ariel. Omar was mentioning this. How does a person find the accessible entrance to their poll site?
I'm muting myself. So the accessible entrance, every poll site has an accessible entrance. It's often the same door as the main voter entrance, but not always. So when you look up your poll site on the website that Omar mentioned, the poll site locator, it'll list both entrances, as he said, the main voter entrance and the accessible voter entrance. So for example, for mine, it says the same information for both. This information is also going to be printed on the mailer that we are going to send you. But when you're actually physically there, you'll be able to know that you found the correct door when you see the international symbol of accessibility, which is actually on this slide right now. It's a white outline of a wheelchair user with a black background. So every poll site will have this sign posted at the accessible entrance. If the accessible voter entrance is different than the main voter entrance, there will be signs to guide you from that main voter entrance to the accessible entrance. And if you could go to the next slide for me. So these are the signs that direct you to the accessible entrance. We call these directional signs. So it is the same ISA symbol, the white wheelchair user with a blue background, but with arrows indicating which way to travel in order to find the entrance. And also pictured on this slide is a sign that goes on the non-accessible entrance, which informs voters where to go. So for example, if the main entrance is on First Street, but the accessible entrance is on Second, this entrance will say your accessible entrance is on Second Street. It'll have the information of the location of the correct or of the accessible entrance. So again, you'll find it on the poll site locator, on the mailer, and then once you're physically there, there will be signs.
Okay, great. Another question is, okay, you get to the accessible entrance and now it's blocked or locked. What do you do?
So the accessible entrance is required by law to be available whenever polls are open. So if you see something, immediately let us know if it's blocked or locked. Okay, I mean, these things happen. We have over 1,200 poll sites, and occasionally someone parks their car in front of the entrance, making it difficult to maneuver, and we have to have the car towed. Or someone might accidentally lock the door instead of just shutting it. These things happen. It is not okay whatsoever. Please let us know immediately. Inform the poll worker. They can, if there's an accessibility clerk at the door, if there's no one there, the door is locked, you can always call the Board of Elections at the number I put in the chat. It's also 1-866-VOTE-NYC. If that's too many numbers to remember, just call 311. 311 will direct your call to us, and we'll be sure to get that entrance open as soon as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. Okay, what if you, as a voter, you go to the wrong poll site? What should the voter do when this happens?
Right, so I want to reiterate that there has been a lot of changes this year because all of the lines of the districts have changed. So for example, even though you didn't move, you might be in a different assembly district, a different congressional district, and there's a chance your poll site changed because of these. So I know you might be accustomed to voting in the same poll site, for the past 10 years, but I just really want to encourage everyone to look up your poll site before you go to make sure you're going to the correct poll site. Excuse me. And hold on one moment, I'm sorry. If the poll worker says that you're in the wrong poll site, the best course of action is to go to the correct poll site. They will give you a referral slip with the correct poll site and its address. So the screen that is displayed now is a screenshot of what the poll worker sees when they're looking up the information to give directions to the voters. It has the voters' election district information, poll site name and address, and directions how to get to the correct poll site. If you're confident that you are in the correct poll site, you can ask for an affidavit ballot and fill out the affidavit ballot. That's a ballot that does not go in the scanner. It goes into an envelope to be processed afterwards. But again, if you're in the wrong poll site, that affidavit ballot will not count. So the priority is to make sure that you're in the correct poll site, because your name has to appear in the poll book. So even if you have voted in the same poll site, like I said, the last 8 years, just double check it, because a lot of things have changed. It happens every 10 years after the census. All the lines get shifted, everything gets kind of shuffled every 10 years. And we're in that window of restructuring, I'll call it.
Thank you for that information. Really appreciate that. When you get your information, I know, oh no, that's not for this election. Sorry about that. Let me strike that. If a person cannot independently mark a paper ballot at the poll site, how does a person vote in person?
So, yeah, I have a couple slides, and I know that we're kind of tight with time, so I might bump through them relatively quickly, but we can always give this information more in depth at a later time. But at first, I just wanted to kind of give an overview that once you're in the correct poll site and you've entered the building safely, we make sure that the entire voting process is accessible. So this includes making sure there's an appropriate space between the voting equipment so voters can navigate the room easily. We design the room layout to ensure the voting equipment is set up such a way that there's a clear path of travel for all voters. And poll workers are to check the entire poll site for accessibility every few hours. And to answer Cathy's question, every poll site has at least one ballot marking device, or BMD, which assists voters with disabilities in their poll sites. And we'll talk about the accessible absentee ballot later. If we can go to the next slide, the BMD, the ballot marking device, is a great tool to help voters with disabilities mark their ballot privately and independently. You don't have to have a disability to use it. A lot of people use it for various reasons. Anyone can use the BMD. Every poll site has at least one. Larger sites have more than one. And there are specific poll workers called BMD inspectors who are available to help voters use the machine if needed. The BMD that we use in New York City is the ES&S AutoMark. And the next slide, for those not familiar with AutoMark, it has a lot of features that are helpful, not just voters with disabilities. Some of the features include a touch screen and keypad with Braille, audio assistance in all the languages of the ballot, high contrast, zoom for enlargement, sip and puff, and rocker paddle. And next slide. So I think it's important to discuss what the BMD does and does not do. It simply marks the ballot. It's just a ballot marking device. It only marks the ballot, and the only thing it does to the ballot is mark it. All it does is mark the ballot. It's like a big pen. It does not print the ballot. You insert the same paper ballot that everyone else does. And the BMD does not scan the ballot. It does not tabulate. It does not count your vote. You have to take your marked ballot to the scanner to actually cast your ballot. So it's not a printer. It's not a scanner. It's just a big pen. And as I mentioned, it's a touch screen. It has the capacity to be a touch screen, so voters can navigate the ballot simply by touching the screen. We have a stylus provided, or you could use your own stylus. And the image on this page is the welcome page of it's a picture of the AutoMark with the welcome page. And another feature, as I mentioned, is the keypad, which also has Braille. So voters can navigate the ballot and make their selections with the buttons on the keypad. And the image on this slide is the keypad of the AutoMark. And the BMD also, for the next slide, also has audio assistance for voters who prefer to hear the ballot read aloud to them. And it's read aloud in all the languages that the ballot is in. The BOE provides headphones with disposable covers, but voters are welcome to use your own headphones if you prefer. You can adjust the tempo, the volume. It has a screen button on the keypad that darkens the screen so the screen goes black, so you're only listening to it. And the image on this slide is the language selection screen of the AutoMark. The text is black with blue boxes on a white background. And then the next slide is of the rocker paddle. The rocker paddle is something that's about a little bit larger than a cell phone, and it has two buttons on it. On the left is a no button that scrolls through the screen, and on the right is a yes button that also selects. And these buttons both have Braille on it. So this rocker paddle could be held, placed in the voter's lap, placed on the floor, and the voter may push these buttons with their feet, their hands, or other body parts. And the image on this slide is the rocker paddle being held in front of the AutoMark. Like I said, it's about the size of a large cell phone, not like a tiny one. The next slide is of the sip and puff. I apologize for that noise outside my window. The sip and puff is a mouthpiece that voters can use to control the BMD. They can navigate the ballot by sipping and puffing. A sip is a short inhaling breath through the straw, and a puff or short exhaling breath. The voter is welcome to use their own sip and puff device, or we have a sterile device provided by the BOE at each ballot marking device. And there's two images on the slide. The top is a voter with a mouthpiece of the sip and puff device in his mouth. And the bottom image is the same voter looking at the AutoMark screen as he uses the sip and puff device. And remember, just anyone can use the BMD, and it only marks your ballot. You still need to bring it to the scanner to be counted. And I wanted to also let you know that there's information about the BMD on our webpage. We'll circulate these links at the end. And there's also a video explaining how to use the BMD on our website as well.
Great. And what if the ballot marking device does not properly work at your poll site? What should you do?
So if there's any issues with the BMD, they are old aging machines, please inform the poll workers for assistance. And there's also an emergency phone number printed on all of the sides of the BMD. You can always call that number as well. The BMD cart itself. So the device is inside a larger cart that it's transported in, and that cart has the phone number printed that you can call. And as I mentioned, you could call the Board of Elections 1-866-VOTE-NYC. And again, if too many numbers to remember, you can always call 311. All of those different ways will get to us. But there are poll workers there to assist you, and they'll be able to call a tech for assistance and repair it as quickly as possible. And I also just want to mention that anyone can assist you voting using the BMD or not, as long as they're not your employer, your boss, your union boss, a poll watcher, or a candidate on the ballot. Anyone can help you. So you can bring an aide, a family member, someone you trust. Anyone is able to assist you at the poll site.
Great. We do have a question in the chat. Hannah, did you want to ask it, or do you want me just to read it from the chat? Okay, I'll just read it. The question from Hannah Blesnick is, how are poll workers trained on the BMD, and are they aware of all the ways a voter can use the BMD, and do they know how to set up each function? So it's kind of like
That's-
3 questions.
That's
but all of it.
that's me. That's not Hannah, but it's
Okay, I'm
fine.
sorry. Okay. Sorry, that was Cara. All right. Can you answer that question, Ariel?
Sure. So for the poll workers who have been already trained in person recently, they have the option to do an online training. But for the poll workers who are new to this process, they are trained in person. And they are taught how to operate the BMD, and it's also listed in the poll worker manual that is distributed to all poll workers. So even if it's been a while, they were previously, assigned a different position and this is new and they need a little refresher, all of the information is available for them in their manual as well.
Great. And I know I saw on YouTube from the Board of Elections that they have an actual video, a YouTube video on BMDs and how they work about
Mhm.
market process.
Yep, I listed that website. The videos that we created are available on our website, and they're in the slides, so I'll be able to circulate those afterwards.
Great, thank you so much. So if a poll worker says they don't know what to do, we should be telling them, well, you better go back for retraining because you were trained on this. This is not an excuse.
And they have the manual with them. The manual
okay.
is available, so they should be able to reference the guide that is there in the poll site.
Okay, and what would the manual be called? Would it be called ballot marking device manual?
Poll
or
worker
something else?
manual.
Okay, poll worker manual,
Yeah,
thank you.
there's a chapter on the BMD about it.
Okay, and Terrence Page has raised his hand. Terrence, what's your question?
Thank you, Kathleen. Hello, Ariel. Hello, Omar. My question is, again, I'm confused with the affidavit ballot. So if you're at the wrong polling place, your ballot, and you use an affidavit ballot, it doesn't count, correct?
Correct. If you are at the wrong poll site and you fill out an affidavit, the affidavit, you're going to fill out all of your information. I am Terrence Page. I live at this address, blah, 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 blah. And before they open the ballot and count it, they'll see if that information is accurate. Is Terrence Page actually, your ballot depends on your address. Let me just kind of back up. So when you move, you're going to have a different district. You're going to have a different ballot. So you're only entitled to vote for the people who are in your district. And so that's why it's important that you're at the right poll site. So I live in Brooklyn, but I work in Manhattan. If I go to the poll site down the street in Manhattan and say, this is where I'm supposed to vote, and they say, are you sure? And I insist that this is where I vote, and it's not, and I fill out the affidavit and I list Brooklyn, Ariel Merkel, Brooklyn, they're going to process this and say, this ballot is for Manhattan, this isn't going to count. So they're not even going to open that envelope. They're not even going to process that ballot. It's just going to be invalidated. So that is why it's important to make sure that you're in the correct poll site. That said, if there's just an issue with the poll book, and you, for whatever reason, your name's not in the poll book, but you know that this is the correct poll site locator told you the right information, you know that this is your your election district, you can fill out an affidavit, and if that information is accurate, then the ballot will count. I hope that clarifies.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're going to a new section, absentee voting. Okay, who can request an absentee ballot, Omar?
Hey, so requesting an absentee ballot or voting by mail, it's a two-step process, requesting and then submitting your ballot. You have a number of reasons for requesting an absentee ballot. You can request an absentee ballot due to a temporary illness. The meaning of temporary illness has been expanded to include on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. So anyone can use temporary illness right now as a reason to request an absentee ballot. But in addition, if you're outside of that, that is a temporary measure that expires at the end of this year. Outside of that, and if that's not extended, if you are outside of the county where you live, or if you're outside of the 5 boroughs, if you're a resident of New York City on election day or during the election period, then you can request an absentee ballot. Also, if you have a permanent disability that prevents you from voting in person, then you can request a permanent absentee ballot request. People who are detained in a New York City jail can also request an absentee ballot, so long as anyone that's not in prison for a felony can still retains their right to vote. So people who are in jail or otherwise in a Department of Corrections facility can vote with an absentee ballot. Now, you can, to do this as well, you can also do it via telephone by calling the Board of Elections, 866-VOTE-NYC, or you can use the TTY at 212-487. Sorry, got the number is 212-487-5496 for the hearing impaired. Or you can request an absentee ballot by visiting your Board of Elections office. The borough, there's a Board of Elections office in every borough.
Thank you so
And
much.
I'm putting in the chat the link to request an absentee ballot from New York City. It's nycabsentee.com. And you can request both a paper ballot and an accessible ballot. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, not a problem. And at that same link, in addition to requesting your paper absentee ballot or the accessible ballot, which Ariel is going to talk about in a minute, you can also use that. You can track the status of your absentee ballot at that same link. So once it's submitted, you can see if that absentee ballot has been received by tracking it at that same website, nycabsentee.com. So you're going to want to check your mailbox frequently to see when you receive your ballot. You need to follow the instructions very carefully, because not only do you have a ballot, but then you have a privacy envelope. That ballot has to be placed within the privacy envelope, and then within the envelope to return it via mail. It should be filled out using blue or black ink. And there are, once you have filled out your ballot, there are a number of ways that you can return it. You can mail it back. That needs to happen 15 days before election day. You can bring it into a poll site while it's in operation as a poll site. That can include an early voting site or an election day poll site, again, during voting hours. And there will be a drop box there where you can submit your absentee ballot, or you can take it to a Board of Elections office. You do have to have it, return it by election. Sorry.
Join the meeting.
Sorry. Yeah, and the you can submit it by mail or in person or at the office by election day. If you're going to submit it by mail, it has to be postmarked by election day.
Great. Another question is, I know there was a recent change in the law concerning absentee ballots. Could you tell us, Omar, what happens when a person requests an absentee ballot today?
Yes, and I'll just point, Miriam pointed out, and it's a great point, you do need stamps to return your absentee ballot through the mail. Now, there has been a recent change to the law around absentee ballots this year. Now, in terms of requesting an absentee ballot and submitting it, nothing has changed. However, because what has changed is the way that the Board of Elections is counting absentee ballots. So instead of waiting until after election day to count all the absentees, those ballots are being counted as they're received. And so what that means is, if you request an absentee ballot and you try and go in vote in person at an early voting site or on election day, you're not going to get a ballot that then goes into the scanner and is counted immediately. you'll be recorded as already having received the ballot. So you won't be able to vote there in person. However, you will be issued an affidavit ballot that can then be sent to the Board of Elections, but it will only be counted if the BOE has not already counted the absentee ballot. You can vote on the affidavit with a ballot marking device. That's also something important to note. But the point is, overall, the biggest change for voters is we used to have what's called like a just in case provision. If you request an absentee ballot, but you decide you change your mind and you wanted to vote in person, that in-person vote would override the absentee ballot. That is no longer the case. Now, if you request an absentee ballot, you should plan to vote on that absentee ballot. Now, if you still want to submit it in person, you can drop it off at a poll site or at the BOE office, and you don't have to put it in through the mail, but you should plan to vote on that ballot.
Great, thank you so much. Another question we have, if a person cannot mark a paper absentee ballot at home, Ariel, could you tell us how they can mark the absentee ballot at home if they have difficulty using a pen or if they have a print disability with respect to reading or understanding a paper ballot?
Sure. So for voters with disabilities who prefer to vote at home, but may not be able to mark the paper ballot at home because they're blind or have a print disability, are unable to use a pen, we have an accessible version of the absentee ballot. This is an electronic version of the absentee ballot. If an eligible voter applies for an accessible absentee ballot, they'll receive an email with a link to an electronic version of the ballot. And then the voter will use their home adaptive technology, such as their screen reader, to navigate the web-based ballot to select their choices. One thing to remember before you request an accessible absentee ballot, well, two things actually, as Omar said, if you receive this, if you request it, don't plan on going to the poll site. You should plan to vote with your absentee if you request it. And then the second thing to remember regarding the accessible absentee ballot is that the voter is still responsible for printing their ballot. So in New York State, the ballot must be printed and returned to the BOE. You cannot email the ballot back to me. It has to be printed and mailed. This is the law. So I know that this is an issue for many people. You know, one of the common refrains is, I'm blind, why would I have a printer? I completely hear that complaint, and should direct those complaints to the proper legislative bodies. But as of right now, the law stands that we can't receive an email. So once you print it, as Omar mentioned, you can drop it off at any poll site without waiting in line. You can just go into the ballot box or use the post office. And you have two envelope options. So we will automatically mail you envelopes to the address that we have for you on file. And we will also, when you're in the portal of the accessible ballot, you'll have the option to download a template that you can fold yourself. So if you're not at your mailing address, if for whatever reason you're not there, you still have a way to have the proper envelopes. So to apply, the next slide, if you're eligible to vote in this election, meaning two things, you're registered in time, you have to be registered to vote, and this upcoming election is a primary, so it's only for people affiliated with a party. So if you are an independent voter, you're not with a party, you don't have an option to vote. This is only for Republicans, Democrats, and a certain part of Staten Island has a conservative primary. So if you're registered with the working families, there's no working families primary. You will not be in the book. You will not have a ballot. You will not be issued an absentee ballot. I know we're going to talk about that more, but I like to just plug in those important things as we go. So to apply online, you can go to the page that I put in the link, and there's actually the previous slide still. There's two pages, two buttons on that link. There's an image of a pen and paper that says online absentee ballot application, and another link below that which says online ABA absentee ballot. To get the accessible version of the absentee ballot, click that second button. And then on the next slide, we'll show you what happens when you click that second button. It'll take you to this simple page in which you enter your name, your birthday, your borough, and your zip code. And remember to enter your information exactly as it appears on your voter record. So if you got married and changed your last name, but you haven't informed us yet, you have to use the name that we have for you on file until you update your voter registration. So it has to be, if your name is hyphened, make sure that you include the hyphen. People with multiple last names, you have to make sure that you enter the information however it is on your voter record. And then the next slide shows, so that's how you apply online. If you prefer to download an application for the accessible absentee, you can also do so on that same webpage. The application is available in English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali. And this page, this screen shows the links to those various languages of the absentee ballot. So this is what the application looks like. It is a simple fillable, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a fillable link.
Form.
Yes, so a fillable form, thank you. And you enter this information. And remember, you're downloading and mailing the application. If you're downloading and mailing the application, it must be received by the Board of Elections by Monday, June 13th. So it's no longer postmarked by that date. It has to be received by that date. But you can also apply for an absentee ballot in person at any Board of Election office until June 27th, which is the day before the election.
Right. And we're just talking now about the initial primary that's happening on June 28th.
Correct.
We're not talking about the November election.
Correct.
You have-
And there's
you still have
another
time for that.
primary in August as well.
Right, that's it.
So that's how you apply for an accessible absentee ballot. And once we've received your application and checked that you're eligible, you can go to the next slide. You'll receive an email from accessibleballot@boe.nyc. And that's going to include the link to your ballot. This is an example of the email that I send you. It has the wrong election day. I apologize. The subject line says your name, accessible absentee ballot, and that email will be translated in the languages that your ballot is available in. So if your ballot in your district where you live happens to be English, Spanish, and Chinese, the email will be in those languages. So you're going to click the link. You can go to the next page. Once you click the link, it'll take you to the portal, which again will be available in the languages that your ballot is in. But before you access your ballot, you once again have to confirm that you're a voter with a disability. The law indicates that this is, unlike the BMD where anyone can use, this is a feature that is only for voters with disabilities. So you have to click on this statement that certifies that this information is true. And then on the next page, you'll enter your name and birth date, again, as they appear on your voter registration record. And that will take you to the ballot. And the next slide is a sample ballot, which says your favorite ice cream, vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, your favorite summer activity, hiking, fishing, sports, or write-in. And you'll be able to navigate the ballot using your home computer or tablet or whatever adaptive technology you choose, such as a screen reader. And you would click on whatever selections you can make, including having a write-in. And once you are done selecting your choices, the next slide will show you a confirmation page. So you can see that I voted for my favorite ice cream as chocolate, my favorite summer activity is hiking, and you can confirm that those are your correct choices. You have an option to change your choices. If you're like, oh, okay, I really don't want to go hiking, I hurt my foot, I'm going to change it. You can always go back and change it. before you print. So once you are done with confirming that everything is accurate, you'll click the continue button, and that will take you to your ballot that you would then print. And again, remember that the voters responsible for printing your ballot. In New York State, the ballot must be printed and returned to the BOE. You cannot email it to me. If you don't own a printer, you can save it as a PDF or whatever format you prefer and print it elsewhere. And then I just want to also go through the envelope portions of how do I get this, because you don't want to just don't just drop your ballot off in the ballot box. It has to be in envelopes. So when you're mailing it or dropping it off for the Board of Elections, the ballot goes inside the oath envelope, and the oath envelope goes inside the return envelope. So this is how we keep your name separate from your vote. This is how we ensure the privacy. You can drop it off again at any poll site without waiting in line. And if you mail it, you can use a couple different envelopes, but you have to sign the oath envelope. You have to sign anywhere on it. Your signature is the key to the ballot. That's why you sign the book when you're in a poll site. If you don't sign the envelope, we'll send you a letter saying you forgot to sign this, please sign it. If we don't hear back from you, your ballot won't be counted. So just remember to sign the oath envelope. Again, you can sign anywhere on the envelope. And the next slide shows some printable envelopes that you can download. After you print your ballot, you'll have an option to also print these envelopes, and it will be pre-populated with your name, with your address, with your election district, your party, which is important for this election since it's a primary. So you'll have an option to print your own envelopes. And if you prefer this method, you can print them and then fold them into envelopes yourself. And I think I mentioned that we will also mail you these envelopes, and the envelopes we mail you will have postage paid on them. But if you're printing your own envelope, you can't print the stamp. So make sure that you remember to put the stamp on the envelopes that you are printing. But the vast majority of people use the envelopes that we send to you. And the last step is to return it. You can drop it off at the poll site without waiting in line, and deliver it to us in person. And as Omar mentioned, you can also track your accessible absentee ballot. This is something that New York City started and now the rest of the state is doing. So we tend to do things that are adopted by the rest of the state. And this is one of the things that we were very excited to launch in the last few years. It's a tracking portal in which you can track to see where your absentee ballot is. So you can see when we actually received it. And that's nycabsentee.com/tracking. And that is the end of the lengthy absentee ballot section.
No, thank you so much. I know we have like 4 or so minutes left. I know we have the important dates in that, but rather than go on that, because I do have 1 or 2 good questions here that we just like to go over. If you know the answer, if you do, we can always follow up with you, with the people, because so the deadlines and that and dates we will provide in the next couple of days to everyone that's here to spread the word. We have that important date that's this Friday concerning for the upcoming primary. So
Tomorrow, register by tomorrow.
Okay. All right, today's Thursday. Sorry about that. So tomorrow, yes. So that's one thing. I know there's a question here from Mr. Di Benedetto about if someone wants to vote and they're hospitalized or in a rehab during the voting period, like what can they do and what should they do? Do we have an answer? Do we know right now, or do we need to follow up on this?
So there's a whole nursing home program that the Board of Elections provides, if that's what you're referring to, in which we kind of bring the poll site to the nursing homes to help provide that service for voters who permanently live there. If you are hospitalized, I think that the best course of action is to probably request an absentee. And when you request an absentee, you can select it to go to a different location. So not the accessible absentee, but if you're requesting a paper ballot, you can say, I live in Brooklyn, but I'm going to be in this hospital in Manhattan. Please send it here, or please send it to someone else. The accessible absentee, you would use the printable the envelopes to print to. I think that, so that's the rehab, I think, is the nursing home question, right?
Could be rehab, sometimes rehabilitation sites are not nursing homes, but I mean, it could be like, after you're in the hospital, you go to rehab just to
Yeah.
get more intensive therapy in that before you're sent home. So,
Ariel, if
does somebody have a quick question?
I think
'Cause
Omar
we're-
has something to say.
Sure, go ahead, Omar.
well, Ariel, just to clarify, if someone is hospitalized and they're not physically, and it's beyond the deadline to request an absentee ballot online or by mail, and they're not physically able to go, they can select someone to get that absentee ballot in person as a proxy, right?
Correct. They'd have to go to the Board of Elections office.
Okay, so that is still an option if you can identify someone to go and pick it up at the Board of Elections office as your proxy. Cool.
Great, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. As to, we have 2 primaries. Ariel, did you want to just do a quick summary of that? Sorry, about where we have one now in June and one in August. And then we will then send out the dates to everybody of all this information in the next few days.
Yeah, I think, Omar, you have that slide of the important dates.
Yeah, and I know we're at time, so I'm gonna have to zoom through it. And we
You want to
can,
just give us a quick highlight of like the super important things that are coming up? Yeah.
yeah,
great.
so these are state and federal midterm elections. The primary was the primaries for all of these offices was originally going to be scheduled for June 28th. Because of the court ruling that ruled that state Senate and Congress districts had to be redrawn. Those 2 offices are going to have their primary on August 23rd. All the other offices are going to move forward as planned on June 28th. Now, the dates are all here, and we're going to share these out. But for this upcoming primary in June, the deadline to register to vote is tomorrow, June 3rd. You can request an absentee ballot online up until June 13th. Or if you want to request by mail, it has to be received by the BOE by June 13th. And you have until June 28th, election day, to return it either in person or postmarked. Early voting is from the 18th of June to the 26th, and election day is the 28th. So all those dates are going to repeat for August. Just the election is going to be on August 23rd. Early voting will be from the 13th to the 21st. The deadline to request your absentee ballot online will be the 8th. And so if you do it by mail, it has to be received by August 8th. And you have until election day to submit it. The deadline to register to vote will be July 29th. And we can
Wow.
share out all those dates and the dates for the general election in an email.
And I just want to reiterate that for a primary in New York State, again, you can only vote if you are a member of that party that is having a primary. So anyone who is registered to vote can vote in November in the general election, but in the primary, it's only, again, for June, it's only for Republicans, Democrats, and only if you live in a special area is there a conservative primary.
Yeah.
Now in August, it's not going to be everyone. It depends on it, because in August it's just your congressional and your state senate. So if there's no primary in your congressional district, you will not have an election. So the June election is citywide, but the August, it's going to be little pockets here and there. It's going to be wherever, like in my district, everybody's running. So there's definitely going to be a primary where I am, but there might not be a primary in August where you are. So again, check poll site locator before you schlep to the polls to make sure that you have an election.
Great, thank you so much.
Same thing goes for a state assembly. Not every state assembly district is having a contest this June 28th. So,
Right.
but there are statewide primaries, so everyone will
Right.
have something on their ballot.
The only one we're sure of is in November, that in October for early voting, and in November that everybody gets to vote.
Yes.
As long as you're registered.
Yes. We can share our contact information up on the screen. Is my email osuarez@nyccfb.info, as well as Ariel's amerkel@boe.nyc.
And we
And
will
we can
share
share
that
this out.
information too. Yeah. Everybody just be patient. It will be probably beginning of next week that we'll get all this information to you. So thank you again. And thank you, Ariel and Omar, for all this great presentation. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for all your great comments and all your great questions. We really appreciate that.
And if
So
you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us via email.
Thank you very
Great.
much for your presentation and your willingness to take the time to definitely educate us. And I definitely learned a lot myself today too.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're
Have a
welcome.
good day.
Happy voting, everyone.
Thank
Yes.
you.